Hello Internet, welcome to another episode of Asian Horror Stories. The 10th Floor by Sophia. I work in the sales industry and more often than not, I will be required to attend social drinking sessions. Over the years, I have become pretty adept at drinking, but I do not consider myself alcoholic. During one of these drinking gatherings, we stayed till around 1 a.m. after midnight. My home is about 1.5 hours away from the bar we are at, and since I felt very tired from working overtime the previous night, my colleague, Anna, suggested that I sleep over at her place instead since her home is very close by. Anna and I go way back from when we first joined the company together 5 years ago. We were close like siblings and always looked out for one another. Of course, I gladly obliged at her kind suggestion. We hailed a taxi back to Anna's apartment, which took only 15 minutes. Anna's home was at a 10-story high condominium. She had just purchased a place recently, and she stays with her mother on the 6th floor. As we approached the elevator, I noticed a note pasted on the elevator door. The note simply reads, "Do not use the elevator after 8 p.m. I look around the note, trying to find additional information stating the reason, but I couldn't find any. Ignoring the note, I proceeded to press the elevator button. Anna held onto my hand and stopped me. I gave Anna a puzzled look and asked her what the big deal was. She led me to climb the staircase instead. Once we reached her place, Anna explained. A couple of weeks ago, she reached the condominium at around 11 p.m. at night. As usual, she proceeded to enter the elevator, ignoring the note. However, even though she pressed the 6th button, the elevator didn't stop at her floor. Instead, it went straight up to the highest level, the 10th floor. Upon reaching the 10th floor, the elevator doors began to open. Anna repeatedly pressed on the door closing button, but the elevator refused to obey. Instead, the doors remained open, revealing the dark walkway on the 10th floor. The walkway was so dark that it was almost impossible to see the other end. Straining her eyes, Anna began to make out the shape of a woman standing at the furthest end. The woman seemed to be slowly approaching Anna in a way no human can possibly walk. She looked like she was floating. Anna darted her eyes down to look at the woman's feet, but she couldn't find any. The sight of the ghostly apparition made her begin to feel dizzy. She couldn't bear to look at the apparition's face. She felt a stinging sensation throughout her body. All of Anna's senses seemed to scream that the female apparition is violent and cruel. Anna desperately pounded on the elevator buttons. The elevator doors finally began to close, then open again, and closed, and opened, closed, and opened. The doors seemed to be mocking at Anna. It has become apparent that the elevator doors seem to have a life of their own. Adrenaline kicked in. Anna pushed forward and exited the elevator instead, barely missing the female apparition's clutches. She ran towards the staircase on the left corridor and descended the stairs with as much speed as her wobbly legs could manage. Anna ran and ran and ran without looking back. Finally, she reached her home and pounded on the door furiously. An unfamiliar man opened the door. She didn't recognize the man, and the man didn't recognize her. Have Anna unknowingly entered a different dimension? "Hey lady, who are you?" the annoyed man demanded. Looking at the unit number 05-02, Anna realized that she was actually on the wrong floor. Without another word, she sprinted back home and locked herself in her room. She couldn't sleep that night. Who can blame her? After going through such a harrowing ordeal, no normal person will be able to be restful. Who was the ghostly woman? Was the elevator haunted? What was the reason behind the elevator note? Millions of questions flooded Anna's mind like a turbulent waterfall. She decided she would question the condominium's security officer. After all, who else would be more familiar with the condominium than the person who actually works there? The following day, Anna proceeded with her investigation. The security officer was called Eric. His office was just beside the elevator on the ground floor. Eric was a plump, bespectacled man with stubbles, dressed in the blue security uniform. He looks like a man in his late 50s. After hearing Anna's story, Eric smirked. You know, I put up the notes on the elevator for a good reason, Eric started. He stared at the young Anna with concerned eyes and carried on with his story. This is supposed to be a secret as decided by the management, but I will tell you anyway. 2 years ago, a family of 4 moved in and bought the 2 large units on the 10th floor. To be able to purchase the only 2 units on the highest level, this family must be kind of rich. The husband and the wife stayed in one unit, while their 2 young sons stayed in the opposite unit. The 2 boys were in their early 20s. The 4 of them were notoriously unfriendly. Not that they are bad people. They just never mingled or spoke to anyone at all. After staying for around a month, the husband mysteriously died at the 10th floor while taking the elevator. He had collapsed due to a sudden heart failure. Witnesses said that his legs were at the doors of the elevator, causing the doors to open and close repeatedly. The husband's funeral was held on the 10th floor, but very few people attended. I saw the wife. Strangely, she didn't seem sad at all. I almost wanted to suspect her. However, the wife also died a week later. She had hanged herself at the walkway of the 10th floor. It was also around the same time that their 2 sons were reported missing. Nobody knew where they were or what had happened to them. Weeks later, the residents staying on the 9th floor reported a foul smell. I had no choice but to use the master key to open the units on the 10th floor. That was when I discovered the decomposing body of the missing elder son. Still, the younger son was nowhere to be found. The police launched a manhunt for the younger son, but after a week of unsuccessful hunt, they called off the search. Eric rubbed his chin before carrying on. Did you know? This building has 2 large water tanks on the rooftop, but only one of the tank was working. The other tank was spoiled, and we hired some mechanics to repair it. It was when one of the mechanics opened the water tank for inspection. They found the body of the younger son floating in the tank. Strangely, access to the rooftop would be impossible because it is locked all the time. Only I have the keys. So, how did the younger son ended up in the water tank? I actually had a hard time explaining to the police. Luckily, the CCTV proved that I was innocent. Following that, many residents have reported that the elevator will only travel to the 10th floor during midnight. Many of them reported being hurt. Some of them actually fainted after seeing the ghost of the wife. Because incidents like this started to happen frequently, I tried to shut down the elevator power after 11 p.m. at night. But still, the elevator managed to work during midnight even without any electrical power. As a last resort, I decided to paste a note on the elevator doors in an attempt to prevent people from taking the elevator after 11 p.m. Upon hearing Anna's story, I was pretty shaken. I am glad that she offered me to stay over at her home, and yet I'm also angry for her for not warning me of the horrible hauntings. I never returned to Anna's apartment, and I have tried to convince Anna to move out as soon as she can. However, I am beginning to think that my warnings were useless. Because Anna hasn't been coming to work for the past week, she has not been answering my calls too. I really hope she is doing fine.